Hi everyone, this video is about how to attach the neck hole facing piece to the bodice of a dress or a top. This is probably one of the trickiest steps. I definitely receive the most questions about this step, so if you're having problems, if you're finding it a bit tricky, don't worry, you are not alone. Okay, so when you first start, you will have a front neck hole facing piece that will look something like this. And you will also have a back neck hole facing piece that'll look something like that. The first step is to sew those two neck hole facing pieces together at the shoulder seams. So all you do is, with the right sides of the fabric facing toward each other, you sew those two seams, one there along that shoulder seam and then there along the other shoulder seam. You'll also finish those edges, so you'll see I've overlocked my edges, but you can use a zigzag stitch or whatever you like. And I have also finished right the way around the outside edge of the neck hole facing. Okay, so this next part is the tricky part. What I will say is, if you are using fabric like this that is completely opaque, don't do this step. It will just stress you out and annoy you. If you have sheer fabric, if you have see-through fabric, you might want to follow this step in order to sort of conceal this overlocked edge when you wear the dress. But please only do it if you absolutely have to, because yeah, this is definitely the part that people probably find the trickiest and the part that annoys me the most whenever I'm making a garment. So normally, because my fabric is opaque, I wouldn't worry about this next step, but just to illustrate it, I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so this is where we fold this outside edge over 1 centimeter toward the wrong side of the fabric. It's tricky because it's going around an edge like this, so yeah, it's quite tricky to do. So you fold it over 1 centimeter. Just trust me that that's 1 centimeter. I feel like after all my sewing, I kind of know what a centimeter looks like these days. And you just go right the way around this edge, folding it and pinning it over just like that. Okay, so you'll go right the way around that edge. I won't, because it'll take me a little while, and I think you can kind of get the drift of what I'm doing. Now luckily this fabric is actually quite forgiving, and you'll see that it sits relatively well. Some fabric is really ugly and this will be really tricky, so just persevere with it. So after you've folded that edge over right the way around, all the way around there, and pinned it down, you'll press that edge down just to hold that in place. So here is one that I have prepared earlier. You'll see it looks exactly the same, and I have just pressed around this edge here to keep that 1 centimeter fold down. Okay, it looks really easy, but I know if you're like, oh my gosh, it's so hard, I agree, it is. Okay, so the next step is to attach that neck hole facing to the bodice of the dress or a top. So here I have my bodice. You can see that is the front side, and then back here we've got the back side. Okay, so you'll have the right side of the bodice facing outward toward you, and you'll have the wrong side of the neck hole facing out, so that you attach the right side of the neck hole facing to the right side of the bodice. So it'll look something like that. So all you have to do is match the shoulder seam here of the bodice with that shoulder seam of the facing and pin it there. And then do the same at this edge, match those two seams, pin it down like so. and then you will go right the way around this neck hole facing, pinning it down to the bodice. So I'll just show you with a couple pins. You might want to put quite a few in. I'll just put a couple in to show you. So I'll take it and pin that bodice to the neck hole facing. So it will look something like this. From here, I will sew a row of stitching around this seam here, 1 centimeter from that edge, right the way around. Okay, so I'm going to go and do that now, and I will be back in just a minute. Okay, I'm back. So if I show you here, you will see that I have sewn that row of stitching there right the way around that seam, attaching the neck hole facing to the bodice of the top. You'll also see that I've finished that edge, so I've overlocked around that edge, and I've also started to clip the seam. So I'll show you how to do it here. It's just really simple. All you do is you just make small cuts in the seam, making sure that you don't cut over that stitching there, just around these curved edges. Now, the reason that you do this is in the next step, when you fold it over, fold the facing over to the inside of the bodice, it will make sure that that bodice sits nice and flat when you fold it. Okay, so you will have sewed a seam right the way around here, attaching the neck hole facing to the bodice of the top. You'll finish that edge, and you'll also make small snips in the seam right the way around those curves there to make sure it sits really nice and flat. Okay, so the next thing you will do is you'll take the neck hole facing and you'll fold it right the way over to the inside of the bodice, like that. Okay, so if I flip this inside out, like so, you'll see you'll pull that neck hole facing up and you'll fold it right the way over. So you can see there on that edge is the seam between the neck hole facing and the bodice of the top. So what you'll do is you'll fold it over and then you'll pin it down right the way around that seam, just attaching that neck hole facing to the inside of the bodice. Now I've seen some people attach it kind of like this, so that when you look on this side there's like you can see a little edge here. I mean, you can do that, that's fine. I guess I prefer for that seam to be nice and flat, so I fold it right the way over. But whatever you like, whatever look you're going for is totally fine. So what you'll do is you'll go right the way around, folding the neck hole facing toward the inside of the bodice and pinning it down. You'll then press this seam here so it's nice and sharp, and the neck hole facing sits really nice and flat. And then you will top stitch right the way around along that folded edge, attaching the neck hole facing to the bodice. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and do that now, and I will be back in a minute. Okay, I'm back with my finished neck hole seam. So you will see that I have folded that neck hole facing that was sitting on the right side of the fabric of the bodice over to the inside of the bodice. I've pressed it down around that edge, and then I've top stitched right the way around this edge here, attaching the neck hole facing to the bodice. just like that. Now, if you didn't put yourself through the pain and misery of folding over this edge here, you'll see like an overlocked or a finished edge. You won't see this folded over edge. Again, that's totally fine. No one will be able to see it. So if I fold this top out the right way now, you'll see that there is my finished neck hole. Ta-da! I hope that helps. I hope that makes it slightly easier for you. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.